Joan? There's some tricky names in there. I'm gonna have a tough time with them as well. So, this story's not going so great, right? If you just read through what Joan is reading Joan is reading for us, where the story is kind of spiraling out of control, and that's what we're going to see take place here in Genesis. And this is the situation we're at, right? Humanity was created by God, the perfect relationship to be able to trust God and walk with Him. And we saw last week Adam and Eve chose to destroy that relationship, to sever that relationship to the point where they're no longer innocents. They've got their independence now. They fought for their independence. They got their independence from God. And now we get to see what takes place. What takes place with humanity on the throne? What takes place with humanity outside of the garden, outside of this unique relationship with God? You'll see God still very present and very active and connected with His creation, but they don't have that same connection that they had while they were in the garden. And we'll kind of see what takes place here. And as we see what takes place, you're going to see what I just mentioned a second ago, this idea of it's going to spiral downward. It's kind of where the story is going to go from here. But God's going to continue to be active and present in His world and always giving hope. And so let me go ahead and pray, and then we'll just jump right into to verse 1 here of chapter 4. Father, speak to us today. Open up your word. Make us see you more clearly. Help us to understand the story that we're a part of. And Lord, how our story fits in with your story. Lord, change us and make us more like Jesus, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So it says here right at the beginning, Adam knew Eve, his wife. She conceived and bore Cain, saying, I've gotten a man with the help of the Lord. So what's taking place here right at the beginning is Adam and Eve knew each other. This is the biblical way of saying intimacy, sexual intimacy is what's going on here. And I want to highlight a piece of this just for a second. You usually just skip over that, right? You don't highlight the piece of sexual intimacy. But I want to for a specific purpose, because what you see in here is that this relationship, Adam and Eve knowing each other, the sexual intimacy of their relationship, is a design of God. This is not like I think sometimes with the way that culture has twisted and perverted this beautiful creation of God, sometimes the natural response is to almost think of it as a bad act, as an ungodly thing. It's not. It is a beautiful thing created by God, and He gives this into the relationship between this man and the woman. What did He say when He created Eve and gave them to Adam? Adam starts singing. He's bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. He's saying poetry, and it says the two became one. That the two became one. That the desire there was two becoming one, and this is a component of that. I always want to kind of throw out on the idea of sexual intimacy. It's the idea that is an aspect of a relationship that me and my wife will have that I will not have with anyone else, that gives us a certain type of depth to our bond. Right? There's not even just that's a physical representation of two becoming one flesh. It's a beautiful design of God that God created. And so we see here it's fulfilling the purpose of two becoming one and fulfilling the purpose of conceiving and bearing a child. So through that, of course, God said to them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. So what's taking place here is they're conceiving. And I like the words that Eve says here. I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. Other translation can be that she has created a human from the help of the Lord. It's like, even think through what's going on there. What's happened so far in the story? Who was the one that created humanity? God. And now Eve's saying, I created a human. I'm like God, but with the help of God. Like, this is it's her design. Right? God said, I'm going to make you in my image. You're going to be co-rulers with me. You're going to multiply and fill this thing. The way that I created humans, you're also going to be, with my help, the ability to create humans. It's such a powerful thing when you get to be a part of that process, if you get to be a part of that process, right? To be able to see life. I mean, it is the defining moment that kind of pushed me back into ministry, and not the other course of life that I kind of had planned was the birth of our oldest daughter. I mean, just in there, just the miracle of seeing God work in there. It is that idea of we have created human life with the help of God, and to see God on display through that. So she's fulfilling kind of God-given purposes here, the Lord, Yahweh, through His help. And she conceives and has a seed. What do we know about her seed? Remember last week when God was handing out punishments from the sin, and it said that to the serpent that you're going to have this animosity between Eve's offspring and your offspring, and you're going to bite his heel, but he's going to crush your head. So that promise of the seed, and you see a seed coming out of Eve, Cain. Now, not the one that's going to be that one, but she still has a seed. Verse 2, it says, again, she bore another Abel. Now, Abel was a keeper of the sheep, and Cain was a worker of the ground. So she has two children, Cain and Abel. Cain the oldest, Abel the second child. Both of them have their God-given roles as well. Remember this idea of God created them as co-rulers with him, created in his image co-rulers to fill the earth, but then also to subdue it, to rule over the world. And part of that ruling was this work that they're going to do. So you see that take place in both of these people, right? Cain is a worker of the ground. Abel is a tender of the sheep, or the one who's keeping of the sheep. He's watching over, protecting, feeding, tending the sheep, and Cain's make. So picture this, right? God made this garden, and he gave them these animals, and now they're taking that work that God gave them, and they're moving it forward. Now, there's work that Abel is doing to make sure the sheep are cared for and fed, and that they're multiplying, and more of them are having, so that they can have food and clothing and milk and whatever else that gets produced from that. Like they're taking the work of the God, and they're moving it forward through their farming efforts. Same thing here with Cain, right? He's tilling the ground. He's now has weeds in the ground because of the punishment or whatever given out to his father Adam. But there's weeds in the ground, sweat of his brow. He's doing the work, and he's plowing fields, he's planting crops, and he's going to reap those crops to feed. So he's doing the same work of God and basically moving God's creation forward. We're going to see more of that take place in here. But they're doing what they're designed to do. It says here in verse 4 that Abel also brought, verse 3, that the course of time Cain brought to the Lord an offering of fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of the fat portions. So over the course of time, these two give an offering. They bring an offering to God. Are they told to do so? Are they commanded to do so? Nothing in the scriptures tells us they're commanded at this point to bring an offering to God. You do see the only so far command that God has given is don't eat that tree. And they did that. But there has been no other commands, but there's something in Cain and Abel that thinks, I need to bring an offering to God. I need to bring a tribute, a thanksgiving to my God. It's almost like, I think there's kind of even beautiful piece in there to see like the idea of giving back to God, the idea of being generous to giving back to our God what he's given to us. Like there's something just innate in that. There's something like innate in being the creation of God that like it should be a natural response. That, yeah, God, you gave me all of this. Absolutely, I'm going to give some of that back to you. I'm going to give some of that to show how much I'm thankful for what you've given. I'm going to give back to show how much I am dependent on you for all that I have. It reminds me of a passage that Moses is the author, of course, of Genesis. He's going to write later in Deuteronomy more of a direct teaching on this subject. Verse 8, or Deuteronomy 8:17, he says, beware lest any of you say, my power and my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the power to get wealth, that you may confirm his covenant that he swore with your fathers on this day. So a direction here saying, hey, beware that part of your heart that's going to say, hey, all that I have is because of me. And it's easy to get there, right? I mean, even like, I'll take myself for example, right? Like I grew up with not having a whole lot of resources as a kid. We were on the poor side of things. Through hard work and whatever else, like I was able to make it through college, and it was a stress. There was a stress and a struggle from where I grew up to make it through college and get a degree. To be able to then there work on master's work, to get a good job, to my wife to have a good job, for us to make good money. There's something in there to be able to say, hey, I did that. I worked hard. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. Anyone else? Like, I worked hard to make this happen. And what he's saying here is, hey, be careful. Warning, be careful that you say that you've acquired what you acquired by your work and your hard work and your power. It's God. How does he say it? You shall remember the Lord God, that is he who gives you the power to get wealth. So it's not neglecting the fact that I had work hard. I had sweat my brow. There's weeds that you're going through as Cain and Abel are going through. But remember, God gave you the power to do so. God makes my brain function. on a day-to-day basis. God gives me the health, the physical health to walk through whatever it is. Like what I have, yes, is part of my hard work, but it's more so on the grace of God and the power of God in my life. And so there's just a reminder here from Moses in Deuteronomy, and I think similar is something that's just innate and should be innate within Cain and Abel, right? Their parents saw God create this beautiful garden for them to live in with all these trees to eat and animals, and God gave them everything. And he says, hey, I did it all for you. You be co-rulers with me and just walk alongside of me. I'm going to take care of you. The idea of offering, giving an offering back to God is showing your gratitude, your thankfulness, your understanding that all that you have comes from God. It's the idea that the idea of generosity is the opposite of hoarding. It all comes down to trust, right? Like if we're going to give away excess, it means we're not going to hoard excess in case something bad happens. Now, there's wisdom in having a savings account and having something to fall back on. But there's also that idea of we're hoarding so much that we don't need to trust God anymore. So there's the idea of being generous with excess means that we're going to put our place in a place of dependency still. That the God who provided yesterday is the same God that provides today and will be the same God that will provide into the future. So there's a lot of key components going into this natural aspect of Cain and Abel leading to giving an offering to God. So God's, of course, going to be happy with the fact that they did this, right? Second part of verse 4. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. Regard means to look upon and to notice and to have favor towards it. So Cain and Abel are bringing offerings to him, and God just kind of it seems as though from the passage here that God's kind of ignoring the fact that Cain brought him anything, and he's acknowledging and praising or thanking Abel for the offering that he gives. Seems weird at this part of the story, right? Why is God doing that? Nothing in the story so far would make you think Cain brought something poor to God. The only components that you're going to see in here, you do not get the specifics of why God regarded one and didn't regard other. You have to start taking educated guesses based off of what you're seeing in the rest of the story. And what we will see after this in the rest of the story, what we start noticing about the character Cain, I think God knows something about who this person is in his receiving or not receiving of his gift. It's interesting how he words it too. He had regard for Abel and his offering, but not for Cain. So it's both the offering and the person, right? He had regard. He looked upon and had favor kind of regard towards Abel and the offering that Abel gave. So Abel, the offering he gave was a reflection of who he is, reflection of his character and the person that he is. And Cain and his offering is a reflection of who Cain is, and God has kind of a disregard for Cain and who he is, and you'll see later in the story, I think, why God does that. You'll see some components of Cain and who he is that makes God distance himself. The other piece you see, though, the only piece in the actual offerings that shows any slight difference is the fact that in Abel's offering, he brought from the firstborn of his flock the fatty portions. You guys have all had a good steak, right? You need a little fat, a little marbling to, it's the better parts is what he's saying here. Some of you don't like the fat, and I'm sorry, but he's saying he's bringing the firstborn, the first fruits, the first that he has and the best of what he has. Now, it doesn't say that Cain doesn't, but I think highlighting the fact that Abel does, there's an assumption that Cain is bringing probably something secondary to that. It's the idea that Abel is so thankful for what he's gotten from God, he's giving the first of what he has and the best of what he has. He's not worried about whether or not there's going to be enough for him, whether he gets to have or participate in the best of it. It's like, God, thank you for all that you have. Here, have the best. There's something beautiful about the first fruits of giving and generosity. I think I learned that kind of as an early Christian, the idea of this first fruits and not waiting till the end of the month after I've spent all I've spent to decide if there's anything left to give to God. But that idea of first fruits. So when God has given, that's the time to show back. And that's just a habit that, by the grace of God, that he's helped me make for me and my wife and our family, is the idea that when we get paid on the month, that first thing that takes place, The first bill that gets paid, I hate even saying it like a bill, but the first bill that gets paid is our gift to God. Is our reminder that God gave us everything that we have. Our reminder that we're not trusting in this income to make it through. We're trusting in the God that supplied that. And there's something about Abel's gift that's just innate, beautiful, from his heart, the best that he has, and the first that he has. So God doesn't have regard for Cain's, but has regard for Abel's. It says in second half of verse 5 that Cain was angry and his face fell. The Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face fallen? If you do well, you will be accepted. If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, and you must rule over it." So Cain's response to this disregard that God seems to have for his offer is anger. It's not, God, could I have done better? There's not humility that you see setting in or questions setting in. It's anger. And you'll see later even like a jealous anger that takes place. But he's angry at God for refusing the offering that he has. And God's, I love, like, even in here, just in a small little piece, God's coming in with a little bit of grace to try to steer Cain in the right direction. Right? He's coming in and he's saying, hey, if you do right, I'll accept it. Right? He's saying that the offering that was done was not from the right heart and with the right methods and whatever. He's not giving us all the details, but he's saying what you're offering is not right. Cain, you know it, and you know that if you would do it in a right fashion, I'll accept it. I'm not trying to keep myself from you. I'm not trying to distance myself. I will be there if you do right. And then he gives that warning right afterwards. But if not, sin's crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, and you shall rule over it. That wording there, you see that before? That wording of his desire is for you, and you shall rule over it? Exact wording, almost exact wording that he told to Eve last week. Your desire shall be for your husband, he will rule over. That similar wording that he's saying there. It's showing the idea of broken relationship. It's showing how sin itself, what did we see sin as last week, right? For the most part, sin in us it's very tied to action usually, what we tend to think of sin. Sin is like doing bad or not doing good. It doesn't just start from the action base. Last week it was a distrust of God and a belief in a lie, and to carry out that belief in a lie, a desire to have something that that God was saying was not good for us, and it was a distrust that God was saying it wasn't good, and we're going to do this our own way. We're going to figure this out on our own. We're going to be our own gods to decide our own right and wrong, good and evil. And that same idea of sin, God is saying here to Cain, like it's crouching at the door waiting to attack. Makes me think of Peter's wording when he talks about the devil in 1 Peter 5. He talks about him as a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. That's the picture that I'm getting here when I'm seeing this idea of crouching at the door. Right? It's the idea of, like, you ever see like those nature shows where the lion's like crouching through the tall grass and he's just like picking off which one's the weak one, which one's the slow one, which one's a little lame. I'm going after that one. And he'll creep up to it until he just pounces and attacks. That's the picture I think that we're seeing here. It's that crouching animal that's ready to pounce on the weakness. That's what he's saying to Cain, but saying to us. That's what sin's like. Sin's looking for weakness. It's crouching through the grass, looking for weakness, ready to pounce once that weakness is exposed. And so he's giving a warning to Cain. He's like, you're on the edge there, man. Like, you're right on the edge. Its desire is for you. What's he saying there? It wants to destroy you. Its desire is contrary to how I've designed you, is what he's saying. I designed you as a good creation. I designed you for good. There's good in you. I see it almost, is what he's saying. But sin's crouching, ready to pounce on that weakness that you have. I mean, it's not just powerful for what Cain is wrestling through, but like every day what we wrestle through. And he's saying, hey, you need to rule over it. You need to say no and make the right decision, is what he's saying to Cain at this last moment. Cain, of course, continues to spiral downward in verse 8. It says, Cain spoke to Abel, his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. This idea that like Abel's or Cain's response again is not humility and how can I change? Right, at this moment, you'd almost say like, okay, he disregarded my gift. I chose to get angry rather than be humble. And then God still comes in a fashion that says, hey, you see what's happening here. Notice what's happening here. Here's a chance. Make the right choice. And Cain still shows this hardness of heart, this lack of humility, and jealous anger that's sprouting up to the point where he goes out and finds his brother, and you have the first murder in the Bible. It's interesting here at this point that like what we've seen so far of God is the creator of life. And then you see Cain as the taker of life. The taker of the life that God created. The taker of the life that Eve created through the help of God. What gives him the power to think he has that right to make that choice? Why on earth would he think he has the right to take something God made? Because he took of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They're making their own decisions of what's good and evil. Cain's making his own decisions of what's evil and what's not evil. He's putting himself at the place of God and making his own decision. God doesn't need to make that decision. Cain gets to make that decision. And in a fit of rage and anger and jealousy, he takes life that God creates. The Lord said to Cain, "Where is Abel, your brother?" I like how this is. This makes me think of when God came to Adam in the garden, right? Last week when we saw that, the sin took place and Adam's putting on coverings of fig leaves and stuff over his body. They're hiding in the woods as though you can hide from God, trying to hide their shame from God. And God comes out like, hey, where are you, Adam? Where are you at? I get that same kind of picture here. But I don't see any fig leaves. I don't see any hiding in the garden. Cain's not hiding. Where's the shame? Where's the remorse? Like, don't you think at this point you would feel like the weight of, oh, what did I just do? The downward spiral is going so bad that even at this point, he's not trying to hide it, and he's not trying to cover himself, and he's not trying to hide himself from God. He's just out in the open. And God comes to him and says, hey, where's your brother at? And his response is to lie and to double down on his hardness. I don't know where he's at. Blatant lie to God. I have no idea where he's at. As if you could lie to God and trick him. Right? I have no idea where he's at. And he says, am I my brother's keeper? Remember, my brother's the one that's the keeper of the sheep. He's the protector. Am I supposed to protect him, watch over him? Like, is it my role to take care of him? Yeah. And not only did you not take care of him, you're the one that brought harm to him. I see the absolute disregard for the life that God created. Disregard for any kind of shame that he might feel and should feel before his God. The Lord says in verse 10, what have you done? What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. Powerful there, isn't it? God's like, this is what the picture I get, right? The idea that God a few weeks ago, he took the dust of this ground and he puts it together like a potter doing clay work. He puts it together and he breathes life into it and he creates humanity. And from that, humanity creates more humanity, which kills the other humanity. And the blood, which is the life of that individual, is now seeping into the dirt that he created them from. And the blood that's seeping into the dirt that was their creation, God says, like, that blood seeping in there is like a yelling out to God of what took place. Like, Cain, you're lying to me, and you're trying to take no responsibility here, but like your brother's blood is screaming to me what you did. How could you have done that? Just warned you about all of this, right? Now, again here in verse 11, God will give some just response to that action. We'll see here, as we see often when you come to God, God's response to sin is one of justice. But he, as the God, is the one that enters into that idea of what justice is going to be, not another human being. God's going to decide justice for this case. So he's going to show his justice, but he's also going to show his love. So his justice shows up in some punishment, giving out to Cain. And it says, verse 11, now you are cursed from the ground, which was opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you with strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. So again, kind of two responses. to Cain's sin. One is this ground that's yielding fruit to you, vibrant fruit, and like producing. It's not going to produce like it has before. Very similar to his dad's, his father's punishment as well, right? His father's punishment is, hey, this ground that you're working is now going to have weeds in it, and it's going to be by the sweat of your brow that you're going to have to work this thing. It's going to be much harder work, and you're going to fight the weeds to make this happen. Now he's saying, not only that, but the ground that's producing for you is going to produce a whole lot less. And you're going to be a fugitive and a wanderer throughout the world. What's I mean? Fugitive and wanderer is the idea that you're broken from relationship, broken from community. You'll see here in a minute here, he's worried about being killed by other people. This poses questions, because who are the other people? Right? So far all we see is Adam and Eve being born, and you're going to have a bunch of questions the Bible doesn't answer. Okay, now, I got my guesses, but I don't even know that they're great guesses. But it's the idea that, like, you'll see in the next chapter even, that people in this day and age are living to like almost 1,000 years. So, do we know how old Cain and Abel are at this point in the story? Whether or not mom and dad might have had multiples afterwards? We'll see another multiple. Maybe there's even more multiples that have. But you're going to see in the story kind of a story that's going to show like a larger amount of people, almost civilization type people. Doesn't answer that question for us, but it does throw in the fact that Cain's saying here, you are going to be cut off from family, from clan, from a relationship. The protection that's given to you through that, the relation, you're going to be cut off from that. And he knows the ultimate cutoff is this relationship with God. And you'll see that here in just a minute. Cain's response to this punishment that God gives out, he says, verse 13, Cain says to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today from the ground and from your face. I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Whoever finds me will kill me. So his response is to say, hey, this punishment is more than I can handle. He's not saying this punishment is more than I deserve. But he is saying, just the weight is too much. I'm not going to be able to take care of it. I'm not going, because now I'm going to work the ground and it's not going to produce what I need it to just survive. And now I'm going to be cut off from family and relationship and cut off from you. So when I wander the world and somebody finds me, when people see me, again, those people that we don't know where they came from, when people see me, what are they going to do? They're going to kill me. They're going to want to kill me is what he's saying. I'm going to be isolated, alone, and they're going to want to kill me. It's too much. I can't handle it. Even in this, God shows his grace. Verse 15. Then the Lord said to him, not so. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest anyone who found him should attack him. And Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod. So God's saying, hey, no. Even in the midst of the judgment that's coming down on you, the just punishment that's coming down because of your killing of your brother, there's still grace I'm showing you here. You think this means death. It doesn't mean death. I'm going to make it very clear to anyone out there. If anyone wants to kill Cain, the vengeance from God will be sevenfold. Vengeance is the idea of avenging oneself. Right? When wrong has been done, it's the avenging yourself. God's saying here, who avenged the death of Abel? God did. God avenged the death of Abel by saying to Cain, the ground's not going to produce like it was, and you're going to be a wanderer and a fugitive throughout the rest of your life. God avenged the death of Abel, and then he's saying here to Cain that, hey, if somebody kills you, I'll avenge you as well, and I will avenge you 7 times. So whatever is a proper vengeance for killing Cain, it's going to be sevenfold if somebody kills Cain. What's God saying? Don't touch Cain. Don't touch him. Like, he's being very careful to say, like, do not mess with Cain. And then he says from there, right after he does that, he puts a mark on him so that everyone knows of this promise or this word from God, and then he sends him away from his presence. So that response, like Cain knows it. Like, I'm not only cut off from the production of what the ground's going to give me, but I'm cut off from God, from his presence, and from his people. Which, at first glance, seems like a light punishment for killing your brother, but the more you think through it, like, it's almost death, or harder than death. To live through the rest of your life without any relationship, cut off from people, wandering the world by yourself without the production of the ground to give you much. Verse 17 says Cain knew his wife, so he'll get relationship, but he'll have to create his own relationship. I don't know where the wife comes from, right? Somebody wants to still be with Cain at this point. Cain knew his wife. She conceived and bore Enoch. When he built a city, they called the name of the city after his name of his son Enoch. Enoch was born Irad, and Irad fathered Methuselah, and Methuselah fathered Methuselah. Methuselah fathered Lamech. Lamech took 2 wives, and the name of the one was Adad, and the name of the other was Zillah. Adad bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who played the lyre and the harp. Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain, and he was the forger of instruments, bronze of iron, and sister Tubal-Cain was named. Did I nail it? Did I do good enough? All right, good enough. No, I need to clap, but never mind. So you have in here Cain having a first child named Enoch. So then you see this, like, multiple 7 generations follow past that. The result of this is this, what I think is what's following here is the work that God still designed for humanity to do. Remember, they're co-rulers. Take this wild wasteland that God turned into a garden and started forming it for human habitation and advance that creation further. Build cities. Gather people together and build a city. Hey, some of you, we're gonna get to the point where some of you are gonna make instruments and music. Right, that's what's going on here. One of his kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, whatever, they're making music and fashioning instruments to do so. Another one's gonna do the livestock and take care of the livestock. And another one's gonna start forging instruments, forging tools. Technological advancement is taking place here. None of which you're seeing is a bad thing. Right? This is like, it's almost like it's the design of God. And this is, I think, kind of cool, I think, in our day and age. Like, you wonder sometimes, like, is my career, my job, what I do, have any, like, godly purpose whatsoever? Or is it just trying to make some money that I might give some back to him? Like, no, it's the work that you do that furthers human civilization. It's your God-given garden work to do. You're designed to be a co-ruler and to participate in the moving forward of God's creation for the betterment of all. Now, you might wonder back, like, is mine doing that? I don't know. That's a question that you got to wrestle with a bit, right? Because not always is everyone trying to seek what's better for the world God created, the plants, animals, everything else, or for other human beings. Sometimes it's what's best for me and what's going to make the most money. But still, the ideal in a non-broken world is to move God's creation forward and continue to advance in music and technology and building of cities and all of those things for the moving forward of God's creation. Now, there's one part of here that definitely seems to be against what God has already described so far. That's that one guy, Lamech. What did he do? Took 2 wives. Lamech took 2 wives, it said. Do you think that's a part of God's original design and creation? When he told Adam and Eve, he said to Adam, he said, like, I'm taking out your bone, flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. And what does he say? The 2 shall become one flesh. Did he say the 3 shall become one flesh? Probably not going to work well, even if you try. Because there's critique sometimes, and rightfully so. Like, you look at a lot of the people in the Bible, and you're like, why do they have so many wives? Why does Solomon have like 700 wives or 300 wives and 700 concubines? Like, why? Like, is God okay with that? No. 2 become one flesh. This is showing you the downward spiral of humanity, not the elevation of humanity. The downward spiral of humanity leads to Lamech saying, hey, I'm going to take 2 of these for myself. And if you think that Lamech might be a man of good character, we'll just read a little bit further. Lamech, verse 23. Lamech said to his wives, remember 7 generations from Cain, descendant of Cain, he said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, you wives of Lamech. Listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is 7-fold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. Not a good guy. The spiral's going out of control, right? Lamech, or Cain, his grandfather, 7 generations previous, killed his brother out of a fit of anger and jealousy and whatever. Sin was crouching at the door and he killed his brother. And Lamech saying, somebody hit me in the face and I killed him. I had no remorse. I killed him. He hit me in the face, and I killed him. And then listen to the words that he says after that, right? Because God's God's grace to Cain was to say, hey, if anyone kills you, I'll avenge you 7 times over. And Lamech's saying, hey, God says he's going to avenge Cain 7 times over. Well, if somebody strikes me in the face, I'm going to avenge myself 77 times over, is what he says. Just the arrogance that's coming out of this disregard for God. Now, no longer God is the one that's going to seek vengeance anymore. It's Lamech. He's going to decide what's right and wrong. If somebody strikes me in the face, the punishment they get. The punishment they get is not even the severity of what God's going to give someone who touches Cain, but the severity they get is 77 times. To remind you of anything else? I love something I studied recently, or I was listening to someone that taught on this, and just opened my eyes to this passage here. I'm going to walk through. Hopefully you know it already, but if not, I think it'll open your eyes. Who's the one that gets to decide what is the avenging of oneself? Do you and I get to decide that? God gets to decide that. What's Jesus' teaching to this? Don't avenge yourself. Leave that to the hand of God. Leave that to God to avenge yourself. If somebody strikes you on the cheek, what do? Turn them the other cheek. Someone struck Lamech on this cheek. What does Lamech say? Kill him 77 times over. Jesus says someone strikes you on the face, you turn your face the other side, and you get smacked on the other side of the face. Leave vengeance to God. Peter asks a question, Matthew 18. Peter comes up to the Lord, Lord, how many, if my brother sins against me and I forgive him, how many times? 7 times? 77 times. Jesus is using the story of Lamech. The world is spiraling out of control to where humanity has gotten themselves on the throne. They dethrone God and put themselves up there. And as they put themselves up there, they're making horrible decisions. They're killing their brother. They're killing people for smacking them on the face and saying, 77 times over, I'm going to take vengeance on you. Jesus says, leave the vengeance to God. Somebody strikes you on the face, it's not death. It's turn the other cheek. Peter, how many times do I have to forgive him? 7 times? No, 77 times. As many times as Lamech says he's going to get revenge, that's how many times you keep forgiving. Jesus' kingdom is very different than the spiraling out of control that takes place in the early in Genesis. So in the midst of all of this, there's hope. There's hope that the seed is going to still crush the snake, and that sin that's crouching isn't going to be crouching anymore. And the murder and misery that's coming from humanity, there's going to be someone who's going to come later. The seed who crushes the head of the snake is going to come later and teach you a totally different way. Last few verses here, verse 25. Adam knew his wife again, and they bore a son and named his name Seth. And she said, God has appointed me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. Another offspring or another seed. Eve is saying here, I've got another seed. Seth. What's so important about seed again? The seed's going to crush the head of the serpent. And the seed here is Seth. If you follow Seth's line, you get to Noah. You follow Noah's line, you get to Abraham. If you follow Abraham's line, you get to David. And if you follow David's line, who do you get to? Jesus. This is the seed. Not the first one, not Cain. Maybe could have been Abel, but not Abel. Seth. The promise still remains. The hope still remains. The grace still remains. And then what do we see coming from Seth and his line? To Seth and his sons, verse 26. To Seth also a son was born, and they called his name Enosh. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. There's a seeking of God, a public worship of God, a coming back to Yahweh. So in the midst of the downward spiral of humanity, still the promised seed. There's still hope found in that seed that's coming back to worship their God, to honor their God, to give offering to their God, to walk with their God, to publicly worship their God. And the end result of all of that is going to be Jesus, who crushes the head of the snake and teaches us a different way. Teaches humanity how to live different than the downward spiral that we see taking place here. The response to all of this is that we have a God who is just and loving, and one that gives us hope, Even though sin is crouching at the door, ready to make its attack, don't let it rule over us. Turn to Jesus, keep coming to Jesus, and follow Jesus' different way. When we want to seek revenge for ourselves, when we get angry and want to leave that to God, forgiveness. Forgiveness. 7 times, 77 times. As much as Lamech brings murder and evil into this world, bring in forgiveness and love and grace. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for the power that it has to change us through the working of your Spirit. Lord, I pray that even though we see in ourselves and in our world the downward spiral of sin, Lord, I pray that you'd help us to see even greater the work of Jesus Christ. Help us to see Jesus, the seed of Eve, Lord, the seed that has already crushed the head of the snake. Lord, the one that is teaching us a different way. Help us to be forgiving and not angry and spiteful and judgmental and jealous of others, Lord. Lord, with the ways in which you have blessed us, Lord, help us to give back and be gracious and generous. And Lord, not because it's a command, but because it's wired into who we are, to show our thanks to you. Lord, work in us in the only way that you know how, Lord, through your Spirit. Work in each of us, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.